see you guys in the dark.
When I was 14, me, my stepmom, and 3 of my siblings were staying in a motel in a small tourist town while making our way to Atlanta. I'm a visibly trans guy. I don't pass well enough for people to look at me and assume male, but I pass well enough for people to assume that I'm transgender. My siblings were in the room while me and my stepmom were sitting on the stairs outside and talking. A random man who had seen my stepmom at the bar downtown earlier approached us and began chatting. He had brought beers for my stepmom and popsicles for me and my sibling. There was this weird, grossed out feeling in my stomach, but I decided to let it go and to keep sitting with my stepmom and eating the popsicles. He kept glancing at me, mostly towards my crotch and chest. It was around 2 a.m. when I started to feel sick, and I went back to the room. I deadbolted the door and texted my stepmom that I felt sick. I sat on the floor in front of the toilet for what felt like hours, dry heaving and trying to make my head stop pounding. My siblings were already asleep. It was only an hour later when I heard a knock on the door, then my phone went off. "Can you unlock the door?" My stepmom texted me. My heart felt like it was in the pit of my stomach when I opened the door and saw her and the man standing there. The man kept staring at my chest, then back at my face with a weird, creepy smile. My stepmom said goodbye to the man and walked in, and the man waved at me and left. I shut the door and locked it again, looking out the peephole to make sure he was gone. My stepmom laid down beside my little brother and almost immediately fell asleep, but I stayed awake, terrified. At like 4 a.m. I heard something scraping against the concrete floor outside of the door. My blood ran cold as I walked as silently as possible to the door and looked through the peephole. I saw the man standing there reaching for the doorknob. I tried to suppress a sob as I stepped back, looking through my duffel bag for my pocket knife and pepper spray. I tried to wake up my stepmom, but she was completely knocked out. My siblings are extremely heavy sleepers, so I wouldn't have been able to wake them up either. Then the dreadful, awful nausea came back. I couldn't keep myself from puking all over the floor, and just after, the man started trying to open the door. I was dizzy, I could barely think, but I held my knife and pepper spray tightly as I stood, waiting. After a while, he stopped trying to open the door. I built up the courage and looked through the peephole, and saw him staring into the peephole at me, smiling, his head tilted. I saw his hands moved up and he made some gestures. First, he pretended to slit his neck with his thumb. Then he made that sex gesture, the one with the finger going in and out of the hole. Then he slowly turned and walked away, his face still locked on the peephole. I stayed there and stared out for a long time, and when I finally felt safe enough to walk away, I heard a large thump behind me. My heart pounded in my ears as I slowly turned around. I was expecting to see the man in my room, smiling at me. But it was just my brother. He rolled out of the bed in his sleep and hit the floor. I helped him up and put him back into bed, explained the throw up on the floor, and then got it cleaned up and sat back in bed. In the morning I told my stepmom about what happened with the man, but she couldn't remember a single thing from last night. I'm almost certain he roofied her drinks and my popsicles, and was expecting all of us to be drugged and asleep so he could come in and do God knows what. It was a crisp autumn day of my 3rd grade year. I was heavily bullied and didn't have a lot of friends. I valued the few I did though. Luckily, my teacher that year, Mrs. Rabine, put us in alphabetical order by our last names. This put me near my friend Tom. Tom is the kind of friend you keep to the grave. We were chatting that morning when Mrs. Rabine introduced us to the new student, Charlie Tarlo. Charlie was fairly gaunt and poorly dressed, not in the unfashionable way, but in the way that his clothes were very battered, like they should have been replaced many months ago. That's when Mrs. Rabine said the unthinkable. Charlie's last name would split up Tom and I for seating. Disappointed, I introduced myself to Charlie, hoping to gain another friend. Charlie didn't speak much. Hindsight, it was likely nerves. Over the next coming days, Charlie started making me uncomfortable. Not in a way I could really put my finger on why. I remained kind though, as I was desperate for friends. After lunch, when all of the students would attend recess, I typically stayed back in the lunchroom to help clean up the cafeteria and take out the trash. On this day though, I was sent outside. On these days I would typically sit on a swing and play my Game Boy. It was something I could do by myself. Charlie approached and sat on the swing next to me. I showed him my Pokemon game that I was playing and explained what I thought I knew about the game to him. That's when Charlie asked to kiss me. Freaked out, I said no, and stopped talking to him. Over the next coming days, Charlie would become more and more overbearing, bringing me jewelry he obviously stole from his mother, begging me to be his girlfriend. I was young and didn't know how to handle it. Tom told him to leave me alone, which helped a little bit. Unfortunately, we had a line dancing day in gym that week. We weren't allowed to tell people no if they asked us to be their partner. I saw Charlie approaching and panicked, and luckily, Tom and I paired up right away, saving me from the awful situation where I would be forced to dance with Charlie. Charlie shortly thereafter would start threatening Tom. Kids in the 90s would threaten to kill each other all the time. This wasn't exactly alarm for concern in the way it is now. Charlie's rage would get worse and worse anytime someone else would talk to me. It was becoming increasingly concerning. Then, one day he brought a knife to school. I was scared, but also too scared to say anything about it, so I kept his secret. Unfortunately, on this day I was sent outside for recess. I would have much preferred to clean the cafeteria. On this day, Charlie's sister, whom I cannot for the life of me recall her name, decided to call me ugly. Honestly, this was pretty normal for me to be bullied, so I shrugged it off. That's when Charlie punched his sister, chased her down and kicked her in the face. After the recess advisor broke up the fight, they asked those around what happened. That's when I raised the concern that Charlie may have a knife on him as well. They searched his pockets, and he had a small fold-out knife in his pocket. He was expelled that day. Oh, this happened a few years ago, but it stuck with me because of how weird and scary it was. So every year for the past few years, my parents have been going on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me home alone. I was 20, so it was more than an appropriate age. Well, this time around some weird shit happened the first day that they were gone. And then this happened the night before they were supposed to come home. The first day they were gone, a guy came to the door to drop something off in the morning. But I didn't want to answer it as it was a stranger, and I thought he'd just leave it at the door like usual. Well, he stayed for about 5 minutes and then got in his car and started to drive off, to which I went outside because I thought he finally left it. This man got out of his car, leaving it in the middle of the road, just to give me my package that I didn't have to sign for it at all. No signature needed or anything. Wasn't dressed like a delivery person. Was in a beat-up car. Very weird and uncomfy. Skipping to the end of the week, I was just chilling out in my living room, and all of a sudden at 11:00 at night, I see this rather large figure approach my front door and starts banging on my door. And he did so for like a minute straight. He stands there and doesn't leave for probably 10 minutes, and in that time beats on the door a few times over. Luckily, my sister and her family live not even a mile away from me, so I call them and her husband comes to get me. By this time, I'm in full panic mode, and I realize that my dogs are in the backyard. My back door is 90% glass, and I was horrified that this person was going to come through the back gate and try to come into my house as my dogs were barking up a storm. Anyways, I get my dogs inside the house and my brother-in-law finally shows up, and whoever was there was gone. He takes me to my sister's house, and we check the front door cameras to see who was there. The cameras had been turned off the whole time this person was there, and for an hour before he started banging on my door. The cameras had been on before that time period, and during the time we were looking at the cameras, they were somehow shut off for about an hour and a half, which was odd, because they're not the type that needs to be charged, and they had never glitched before then, but were actually very sensitive. To this day, I don't know who it was that showed up at Tension House. I checked the local news and everything, but nothing ever came of it. I don't know if they were trying to rob my house, or if they had other plans, or if it was potentially the delivery guy from earlier that week. But it still freaks me out to think about, and I hate being home alone at night because of it. This story takes place around January 2024, and I, 22F, live on a one-floor house with a basement. No attic, no second floor. I suffer with extreme sleep paralysis. All the sleep issues I have. Sleep talking, walking. I sleep with my eyes open. I snore. I sleep with my eyes open, and sleep paralysis. My sister was working late for a few nights, and I was sleeping on her bed since I had just had the flu, and I was extremely hot. It had snowed for a few days, so there's snow all around. Well, that night I have my usual wake up, before my body does, and all that before I see him. Not a shadow demon in the corner, just a man outside. It's scary, and I was terrified until I was able to get up. It was the next morning, where my dog had to use the bathroom, and I look over to my window, and beneath it is footprints. The thing about my windows are, since the basement goes up for a bit because the house is a sectional, 2 halves made whole, my windows is nearly 7 feet from the floor, and this guy was closer to the top of the window. So I gathered the dog, called my stepfather from his room, and had to show him the footprints. I locked the windows that day and slept in another room. He never came back, but it was just terrifying. When I was a little girl, I'm 18 now, I had this friend called Harry. We met through school, but our dads worked together. My dad got his apprenticeship through his dad and made our families close friends. Harry occasionally had days where he would be completely different from the kid I knew, and I mean screaming, flipping tables, etc. in school, which was later found out to be a mix of autism and ADHD. Unluckily for me, and him as well as a few of my old friends, he got the kind of mix that made him overly creepy and violent, even in the present, if he didn't get what he wanted. But I only found this out in year 10 of school. When we were pretty young, I think around year 4 in school, when I was told never to go near him by my parents. I later found out it was because of his mother being overly obsessive and stalkish to my dad. She managed to get my dad fired by Harry's dad, because she went through my dad's personal messages and DMs on his laptop during lunch, and found my dad and Mum's personal messages. God knows what she saw in there, but I know she found my dad saying he didn't enjoy working with Harry's dad. Unknown to her, it was because of the lack of clients my dad got, not because of Harry's family. This was enough for her to scream the shop down to her husband, Harry's dad, a client, and my dad wording the messages out to make my dad sound like a horrible person. This resulted in my dad losing his job and moving his work to Eastleigh. I didn't talk to Harry for about a year after that, which is why I think it was year 4 when that went down. But in year 6 of school, ages 10-11, I found myself in a very close trio friend group with him and his best friend Isaac. I grew a crush on Isaac, and we later on begun dating, with Isaac's confession happening with Harry right next to us as we walked a marathon on our school's field. We spent every day at the park nearby playing manhunt, etc., and it was great, but in year 7, going into our teenage years, we completely grew apart. Harry moved schools for a couple years and came back in year 9, but I never really saw him around school at all, and never talked to him and me, and Isaac eventually broke up in year 7, causing us to lose contact fully. The next time I talked to Harry that I remember was during my year 10 work experience. I was teacher's assistant to a group of kids, and he was helping with fitness, so we came across each other during the kids' PE class. We briefly caught up, and I was unfortunately in the I'll have a crush on the first person who pays me attention phase, so for a brief moment I thought I liked him, but the feelings very quickly left when I found out he was with one of my friends at the time. We didn't speak again for a long time until him and my friend broke up, where she warned me about him. She told me that he had my profile pictures on WhatsApp and Instagram screenshotted, which he excused by saying that his power and volume buttons were easy to press, and he often took accidental screenshots and would leave the moment my friend asked him why he even pressed on my picture in the first place. At first she thought he was cheating on her with me, which explained why she previously completely distanced herself from me. But I showed her mine and Harry's messages, showing our last conversation being in the summer holidays before year 7, and she thankfully believed me. She told me that he likely had something for me, and if he asked me out, to say no immediately, with the reason that he often keeps pushing for every little thing, and that the rumors were true. There were many rumors about him doing unbelievable things to people, which I won't go into detail about. If someone said, "No, I can't hang out today," he would turn up at their house. Or years later at my work, trying to hang out with you because he added it to his schedule, and many other things which I can't mention on here, but basically he doesn't believe in consent in most situations. He would pressure you in order to get what he wants. Thankfully, my friend got out in time, and we all collectively helped her through the messy breakup. At the time, I fully listened to my friend, but the conversation quickly left my mind as time passed. It was only until we had finished our GCSEs and were starting out in college that he tried to reach out to me through Instagram since our numbers had changed. I unfortunately don't have the conversation anymore, I just looked for it, and it was gone. But he started by telling me he had a massive crush on me when I was in year 8, which already made me uncomfortable. But we moved the conversation to Snap, since he added me somehow by search mid-conversation, so we just naturally switched to Snap, since we were both on. I wish I took pictures of my screen, but he said very creepy things about how I looked, and it wasn't like overly mature, but just the random "you are so pretty," which was enough to make me want to leave the conversation. He went into more detail, saying he had a massive crush on me in year 10 and 11 when he was with my friend. He eventually asked me out with another wave of compliments, and before I could reply, he messaged me again, asking if I got the number bus I got into college at the time. Since he lived nearby, I figured he just saw me on it here and there, so I said yes. And if he goes to college in the area, which he said yes, and proceeded to tell me how he always saw me sitting at the back right seat. That was one row in front of the back of the bus, and he was too shy to say hi. I found this very creepy too, since I had never seen him once on the bus, and he was the type of guy you can easily recognize. He was that type of guy you'd see at every anime convention with the fake katanas. My seat allowed me to see everyone who got on the bus, and everyone sat behind me as I walked up to the seat, and I never saw him, which made me feel like he was behind me the whole time. I spent the rest of my college years feeling like he was sat behind me watching me when I couldn't see him. Every time I got on the bus, I would actively look out for him, but never saw him. A few times I'd see his Snap start to message, but when I looked around me, it would stop, and I'd never see him on the bus. There was even a few times where he would say, "You're on your way to college," or "You look good today, saw you on the bus." But when I'd look around, he wasn't there, and I was the type of person who would look out the windows the whole journey, so he wasn't outside. He eventually confessed his love again, and I rejected him, telling him I was only looking for women. I wasn't aware that I was lesbian at the time. Months later, and he tried again, pulling the same creepy messages, but getting more forward with every attempt, which this time I told him I wasn't in. He then tried again a month later, which I told him I was gay to see if it would stop him. Spoiler, it didn't. And he tried again a few weeks later. That time, I told him I liked someone, and that's when he started getting more violent. He tried one more time, which I told him I was in a relationship. The part that got violent with these constant messages was his responses to my rejections. The first time I rejected him, he sent me a photo of him crying. The second, he put the "oh, okay." The third time, he left me on read. The fourth time, he snapped and wrote "for feck's sake," and didn't message again for a while. And the last one, I quickly asked if he had found anyone, of which he said not yet, and we left it there. Time went by, and I didn't hear from him. I finished college and started working full-time with my brother, who is now my manager, when Harry walked in late evening, getting an energy drink and some crisps. Instead of using our 4 self-serves, he came up to me at the till, and he was the Harry I knew. And I don't mean the violent, creepy one. I mean the casual, genuine guy I once knew, and I reintroduced him to my brother since he knew of his family, but didn't completely know Harry. During my break, later that shift, Harry messaged me on Instagram again. This time I do have the chat still saved and screenshotted. It was the usual, "It was nice to see you again," and then he started talking about catching up, which I wasn't entirely happy about. The last thing I want is me alone with him when I know he can't control himself after a drink, or any time past 8 p.m., so I just agreed. But didn't proceed with it, just said, "Yeah, we should," but didn't actually try to make a plan. The next day, we talked about our upcoming results that happened a few days ago in the present, and what we were individually going to do. I mentioned I had work, so I might buy myself a little something, just some casual small talk, when he hit me with the word for word, "Also, to be fair with you, I really liked you when you were going out with Isaac, And when I acted surprised, he texted again saying, yeah, and it was like a massive one too. I didn't know what to say, so I left him on read, and I haven't heard from him since. Even though it's only been a week, I know he will probably try again. Unfortunately, he has all of my socials, multiple different cosplay accounts on social medias. He knows where I work, live, and we live very near to each other, so blocking him would only result in him trying to see me at work. Or somewhere in person, so I'd much rather keep him on the screen. Then progress into in person, since he's much more unpredictable, but I often find him stalking my accounts every night. I know he will try again since nothing seems to get by him. I'm just thankful that I have my older brother at my work to keep me safe, just in case he showed his true colors at my work. Also, just to clarify, around 3/4 of this happened in person, the other quarter happened online. I used to work at a gas station in my area back in 2019, so it was the start of my graveyard shift on a Friday night, usually my first night back to work. It's pretty quiet, I get a mix of drinks, stoners, and so on. But this night I would ultimately call emergency service. So I was working the counter checking people out, when a guy comes in with black backpack talking to himself. I didn't think anything of it, cause we get people like that all the time. Well, fast forward a few minutes, I'm checking out a customer. Then he tells me some guy in a backpack has threatened to bomb the beer cooler, for some odd reason. I assure him he's probably full of shit. Well, I'll check it out after I'm done with checking him out. So as I get done checking him out and get his cigarettes or whatever it was he is needing, I go to look for backpack guy. Nowhere to be found, so an hour goes by. I'm cleaning. I decide to go to the bathroom. This guy's in the stall on the floor saying the Nazis are coming back if you don't blow the toilet now and so on. I ask him if he's okay, no response. So I go back to the counter and call emergency services, because due to store policy, that's something serious when someone makes a threat like that. A few minutes later, police show up and arrest the man.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.